Welcome. I'm Jane Simpson. I'm a poet and a historian and a writer of liturgy from this cathedral, the Transitional Cathedral in Christchurch, New Zealand. And 2 days ago we launched a new liturgy that I have written, The Farewelling of a Home. There is no liturgy like this at the moment. We have had blessings of homes for at least 40 years, but no farewelling of a home. So this liturgy was launched in this cathedral 2 days ago. I'm very sorry those of you who are waiting for it didn't see it on the live stream because we had technical problems, but today is an even more auspicious day because it's the 10th anniversary of the 22nd of February 2011 earthquake, which devastated Christchurch. And there are other memorials on today to remember that. So this liturgy very much came out of that earthquake. Without this earthquake, there would have been no liturgy because the need was so extreme. In the city of 400,000 people at that time, 100,000 homes were damaged or destroyed, and 185 people lost their lives. We are remembering those people today in a civic ceremony, but in this liturgy we are remembering the voiceless people who lost their homes, who left to go overseas, who never had their cases settled, and even today there are insurance claims and pickets of insurance companies because of that. Behind me is the Kahikatau Memorial for those who died, and this is one of New Zealand's most beautiful ancient trees, and we're remembering the new life that has come out of this disaster. Now, on the day, we also welcomed people who were here who lost their homes, people who supported them. Many community groups sprung up out of this disaster, Greening the Rubble, a number of different groups, gap fillers, and people still trying to secure justice and their MPs helping them to do that. There were poets and other writers and composers and musicians, artists and filmmakers, many of them from the churches in Christchurch. People who believe in the power of liturgy to transform, to make the ordinary extraordinary, and also the pioneers of the use of Te Reo Māori in liturgy and everyday life. So we are celebrating the launch of this liturgy, and here 2 days later making sure that you can enjoy that as well. Now, this liturgy came out of the earthquake, there's no question about that, but it is also more than the earthquake. So one thing that religions have to offer is the power of lament, the power of pouring out one's soul before God, maybe in anger also at what has happened. And for me, my first experience of this was in 1974 when our Prime Minister Norman Kirk died in office. And I can vividly remember his coffin being brought down the steps of Parliament. He was a very big man, and we weren't quite sure if the coffin was going to get down safely. But there were Māori women, kaikaranga, who were wailing very deep, ethereal cries, and it hit me in the gut, as nothing else could, and I felt I needed to cry. So with this liturgy, I'm going to read 1 or 2 of the laments, and when people are going into their house and saying goodbye to it, when they say these laments, I hope that they will feel the freedom to also grieve, either there or maybe later on. So, prayer after a natural disaster, prayer of lament. O God, this house sheltered many people, offered protection from storms and floods, earthquakes and fire. Now it is a wreck. We can no longer call it our home. We look on the charred remains, tangled timbers, concrete rubble of homes now unlivable. We think of others who have lost their lives, loved ones and livelihoods. Join us in your love, which knows no boundaries. Let us start your work to make all things new. Give us your strength and endurance for the path ahead, wherever it may lead. Now, at that time, I was teaching English as a second language to people who were New Zealand citizens or permanent residents, who were in the workplace, but their lack of English meant that they were stuck in low-paid jobs, and often they found it very hard to make their voice heard at the things that were wrong in the workplace. I had a Filipina student who lived in the eastern suburbs, and she had to commute over to Sockburn, to her factory, to work. When the earthquake happened, she ducked under the workbench as she felt everything shake, got home that night over the roads which were broken, covered in liquefaction, covered in mud. The next day, her employer said she had to go to work. Would have been an hour's trying to get across these ravished roads. She said, "Sir, my house is broken." That is the poetry of someone who speaks English as a second language. And I have used that in this very short lament. Lament after an earthquake. O God who weeps, our house is broken. Our hearts are broken. Our home is no more. From the simplicity of that lament, there is a prayer which is very elaborate, a collect in one sentence with all the sentences or phrases nesting inside each other, and this is something we very much find in the Book of Common Prayer. And so it's marvellous as a poet and someone writing liturgy to be able to go from a very simple prayer to quite a complex prayer. And you don't have to, when you use this liturgy, you don't need to use all the prayers at all. You can choose and also use your own. So I'll now read this more elaborate prayer, which was given to me by a priest assistant then in our cathedral, Ben Randall. And I had to shorten it a bit, but I don't think he minded. So I'll read that prayer now. Vulnerable God, at whose death the earth shook, and by whom we are raised to fullness of life in your household and commonwealth, be present with us in the midst of destruction and loss as we farewell this home today. Marvellous. Now, this liturgy was originally published in a journal, in the Australian Journal of Liturgy, which is a very fine, refereed journal. This was about middle of last year, and I realised the only way that this liturgy could be used by people having to leave their home for the last time, whether moving to a retirement village or moving cities, was for it to be published as a book. No one would find it in this journal, which is not online, and as marvellous as it is. And also, before this liturgy, there was an academic article called Farewelling a Home, the Difference an Earthquake Makes. So it was really the article exploring the possibility of something new, not a deconsecration of a church, not a funeral of a person, but a farewelling of a home, that led me to write this. And I'd like to thank at this stage the Australian Academy of Liturgy, who gave me permission to use this. Without them, we wouldn't have this book today. So between the publishing of that, of course, the huge event affecting the whole world today is the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic. So I have included a prayer due to a global pandemic. God with us in our distress, in the turmoil caused by global pandemic, when millions have lost their lives, we come to you. We have lost our jobs. We have lost our livelihoods. Now we have lost our home. Be present with us as we say our goodbyes. Out of the world's pain, bring hope. Guide scientists and governments fighting the virus. May the homeless be housed, the hungry fed. Your kingdom come here on earth. In New Zealand, it took the coronavirus for us to take the homeless off our streets, for us to house them and feed them. And I know this is true in other parts of the world. So God's kingdom came when those people were looked after and cared for and loved. And may that continue after the virus has gone. Now, the other thing about the book, what makes it so different from a liturgy, is this marvellous cover by the artist Gretchen Albrecht, a leading New Zealand abstract painter. And I'm so thankful to Gretchen for giving me permission to use this wonderful painting. In the early drafts, I showed the cover to different people, and they held it and were mesmerised, entranced. And I said, what does that cover speak to you of? And they said, hope and a new beginning. That is what their farewelling of a home is about. It's not only about lament, it's about hope, moving to the unknown and a new beginning. So thank you, Gretchen, for this marvellous painting. The other thing also about a book is that I can have a foreword. And a dear retired Anglican bishop, a leader in liturgical reform in this country, has written a foreword. So that's the Right Reverend George Connor. And over the years that I have been, as an academic, writing about New Zealand liturgy, we've had many emails, and he has illuminated many points for me from primary sources and commented on my work. He didn't know I was going to write a liturgy. I left that as a surprise, and I think he was delighted to find it. Now, the structure of the liturgy follows a structure that has been set out by one of the leading ethnographers of religion, Arnold van Gennep, and it follows, if you like, a preliminal phase when we gather, when we acknowledge the loss, and that is lament, when we give thanks for the past, we have the blessing and sending out. So there's a clear structure to this liturgy. When you use it, you can leave out any of the prayers or sections, the prayers, and the liturgy will still hold together because it has the structure. It isn't just a collection of bits and pieces. It does cohere and work. So the middle section was taken from a liturgy in a New Zealand prayer book called The Blessing of a Home, which I have also studied and written about. And in that, in the middle section, people go through the rooms, give thanks, they might have a scripture reading and a time for prayer. In the blessing of the home, there's no place for, if you like, the contribution of the people who are there, because it's a brand new home they're moving into. There aren't memories. But in this one, there could be memories 40, 50, 60-year-olds, even from another generation. So I'd just like to share another story now. I came to New Zealand when I was only a few weeks old, about this long, on the boat with my parents from England. And we lived in the same house. My parents had the same house for 42 years. Then my father had retired, and it was time to move to something smaller and easier to look after. And so the home was going to pass into other hands. We heard that the new owner was a valuer, and he said he would keep all the trees for his daughters to climb in. That didn't happen. He bought the house to demolish it and buy a new one, or build a new one. So it was a tremendous sense of loss, that everything we knew was being obliterated. And I said to my parents, We need to do something. We can't just leave this house. We need to honour it and remember it. So I suddenly thought we had this wonderful liturgy of the blessing of the home in the New Zealand prayer book. And I thought I would photocopy that, scribble all over it, and turn it into a farewelling of a home. And tell my parents where I'd like them to say different things. So we did that. So my parents are Roman Catholics, I'm an Anglican, and at that point I became a priest for my family. It was very, very poignant and moving occasion. So I can trace back something of what I've done here to something I did 21 years ago for my family. So I'll just read you one or two of the prayers here. Prayer in the living room. Now the householders say this, and the householder could also be the leader of the liturgy. Gracious God, we give thanks for the memories that made this house our home, for this room where we sat and talked, worked and relaxed, where we have laughed and cried, argued and made up. As we say farewell to this home today, guide us, guard us, shelter us under your wings. Now at that point there's a rubric. There may be reflection, the sharing of memories, prayer and saying goodbye. And then there is a refrain, which you may or may not wish to say. So there's a structure going through the whole section here, remembering and giving thanks for the past. So God of blessings and endings, gather these our prayers and memories into your love. This is a prayer given me by Bishop Brian Carroll, who is the father of the current Bishop of Christchurch, Peter Carroll. And that was translated for me into Māori, so there is again a choice. And when this liturgy is translated into other languages throughout the world, I want that prayer to remain in Māori, so people can see how we need to recognise, acknowledge and honour the Indigenous peoples of each land. Now at this point I'd like to talk about how the book can be used. I've mentioned who can lead it. A civil celebrant can lead it. Also in disasters there may not be clergy around, so the householder could lead it themselves. If the house has been destroyed, you can go to the cordon or the nearest place. You could farewell the home from a church building or a community centre. If you are fleeing a violent relationship, you could farewell it from a safe place elsewhere. In fact, this liturgy could be used as the basis for many other liturgies of farewell. It can be used certainly by people leaving their home to move into a retirement village, and in my own community here in the cathedral, a person said to me, "We've had our home for 50 years and we've got so much stuff and we really don't know what to do, but we want to remember the house." And he said some prayers in it before the liturgy was published. That will probably become the main use of this liturgy, I think, especially in the Western world, rather than natural disasters. When I came to put it together for publication in the book, I put the liturgy, the prayers for natural disasters at the end. Unfortunately, I was told the other day by a librarian collecting material to do with the Christchurch earthquake that there wasn't enough of earthquake in the liturgy, so she wasn't going to buy it for the library. I think that's a great pity, because all sorts of things have come from the earthquake, which are positive and new beginnings, and not to deny what happened, of course. So I hope other libraries will buy it despite that. There is a problem often with prayers and new liturgies in that vicars, ministers are in the habit of taking things and using them without permission. They don't see it as someone's work and lifeblood that they should be recognised for because it is their living. And so at the bottom of every page we have a copyright notice that it should be respected, but clergy are very welcome to come to me if they would like to use some of it or all of it, and we can look at my giving permission for that. Marvellous thing happened at the launch here. Bishop Peter spoke, he prayed with me, he said that clergy and bishops needed to get behind this because there had never been a liturgy to farewell a home that was published in this kind of way. There had been one-off ceremonies, but not ones designed to go out there into the world. He bought 20 copies, which was quite remarkable, to give to other bishops and clergy to encourage them to do the same. And those of you looking on YouTube, I do encourage you to think about ways in which you can use it. I'm making them available in a set of 5 so they can be reused time and time again and enjoyed. Lastly, I'd like to talk about the press I have set up, which is Poema Liturgies, which is Greek for poem, artwork, masterpiece. I'm not claiming my work is a masterpiece, but hope it's the beginning anyway. So I have set up a website, www.poema.co.nz, and I'd love your suggestions as to new liturgies that could be written. Already, the poet Bernadette Hall, who launched the book 2 days ago, suggested the farewelling of a home could be the basis for the farewelling of a person within their home after they have died. And we are thinking of a name, Farewell Beloved. So this could be used for people who maybe don't find church language means much to them, but certainly appreciate poetry and the depth of meaning that can come from that. So, as I said, this is a new liturgy. It came out of academic research. It came out of the ravages of an earthquake, of people from the eastern suburbs who came to me and said they had lost everything. They wanted to go back to the site, to remember, to grieve, to have a new beginning and offer something to other people. So this is what I hope I'm doing with this liturgy, offering it to others in many different contexts, and hope that you will also enjoy it. Thank you very much.